But at the end of the day, the business itself has to provide value, right? Like marketing is just an accelerant. It will get you there faster. But at the end of the day, the hottest opportunity is to do a business where you create value, but do it in a better way than what's out there. Look at Steal Our Winners. I took an ordinary business teaching people marketing strategies, but did it in a different way. And now I am creating that way. And so my point to you is don't be so concerned with what other people are doing. You know, it's like what I used to tell people. So I wrote the Internet Business Manifesto, then I quickly followed that up with the Missing Chapter. And the Missing Chapter was all about how most entrepreneurs pick the wrong business. And primarily I was taking aim at a lot of the people I learned from, a lot of my mentors and people that I learned a lot from in direct response, because the direct response way of doing business was find a need out there and fill it. And my point was, just because there's a need out there doesn't mean that you're the right person to fill it. If you want to get married, you don't go out there looking for the most desperate person to just propose to so that, like, now I'm married. You want to be married to the person that actually is worthwhile and you can have a lifetime relationship with. Now, even with that thought in mind, most marriages don't work. So if you're not thinking that seriously about what business to start, you're already off track. Welcome to another live stream. This one is all about just answering questions. I'm completely new and confused about where should I start my career in digital marketing. Kindly help me from where should I start? Well, it depends on what you're coming to the table with and where you see you ultimately getting to. One potential avenue to go down online is being in the information business. That works if you're into information, you're into constantly learning and have a drive of curiosity, and there's a topic in an area that you would like to invest yourself to have a level of expertise in. But that's just one form of business online. You could also do affiliate marketing. You could do e-commerce. Like, it really depends on what are you passionate about to start with, because starting a business especially requires a force of will. There's going to be things you're going to have to push through. And I find that's always a lot easier if you are passionate about the thing that you're doing. So it has to start with who you are and what you want to be doing and what you're passionate about, what you have extra energy for, what you could see yourself doing. And then from there, it's about overlaying that over the opportunities that exist online and figuring out where your unique spot is. So what I would advise you against, Shania, is just totally discounting who you are and just looking out at the different opportunities there. Because just because there is an opportunity doesn't mean it's the right opportunity for you. Hey, Aless, what books influence you the most in marketing and business? Few inspirations welcome. Definitely the Mr. X book is one of my favorite books on marketing. That's a Jay Abraham book, Money Making Secrets of Marketing, whatever, superstar. So the Mr. X book definitely ranks high as one of my all-time favorites. Predictably Irrational by my friend. Yeah, I'm just thinking of what other books. Any of Dan Ariely's books are really good. Let's see. I really thought Flip the Funnel. I really enjoyed that more recently, I guess. I have favorite books for different things, right? And so certainly Breakthrough Advertising is one of my favorites of all time. But like, I wouldn't recommend Breakthrough to everyone. I would recommend Breakthrough to specific people based on what it is that they're hoping to achieve. So I would say that it really is dependent on goals you have, what you're trying to achieve, and based on that, I would say then that I would have some recommendations. But I read all the classics, and I certainly think there's something to be said about that. So that's Ogilvy, Hopkins, Lasker, Claude Hopkins, what's Charles Schwab. All of those classics, I think, are worth reading and worth really understanding completely. And then from there, I would say that the best persuasion book I've ever read is Hidden Keys, although when I went through it, it was a course. In the most specific way possible, how to think outside the box. You got to give me more than that. Think outside the box as it relates to what? I think a lot of times it's about like dropping your attachment to the way things have been done in the past, that hence the box, right? And thinking about like, what are novel, new, completely different ways of trying to sell this if we couldn't use the ways that we've used in the past. But I say that, Hamza, with the understanding that you might have something specific that you want to think outside the box for. And then for that, it would be more about how has this always been done in the past? What are the ways that that's looked like? And then what could be done differently to get to that same outcome? Look at it, parse it from many different angles. And this is where it gets dependent on what you're trying to do. For Steal Our Winners, let's say, if I'm trying to think outside the box, I'm trying to think of, like, with this recent campaign, who else sells things for a lifetime, and what does that look like? And if it was a car, how would we sell it? If it was a bike, how would we sell it? If we were selling it as a consulting, how would we sell it? It's just trying to prime yourself to come up with different ideas, even if they're totally abstract and not completely applicable. They open up possibility. So often we come into things with a fixedness of the way we look at the problem or the type of solutions we're going to come up with. And it's not necessarily easy to put that to the side, but it's easier to do that when you create hypotheticals that are outside of your realm of understanding. I've never run a car dealership, for example. So if I was trying to sell this like the way a car is sold, that's going to open up possibilities for me, because I'm now entering into an area where I know little about. And so I don't have the same fixed ways of dealing with stuff that I would if it was, like, let's say, looking at it like an information product or something like that, which I've been conditioned to think inside the box for the most part because of the length of time I've been in the industry. So to think outside for that, I have to move out, like pretending I'm in a different industry selling it or something like that. Hope that helps, Hamza, but maybe if you want to ask me something more specific, I'd be glad to answer it. Hey, Rich, just signed up for Steal Our Winners and pumped to learn. Do online fitness coaching, relatively high ticket, and curious what the best strategies might be to market going forward. The coaching is super legit, and I do a double your money back guarantee, but not sure how to get out from some of the noise in the space. Well, Craig, that's the critical spot. I would imagine that what ideally works is you have to figure out, well, you don't. Okay, so there's many different ways to handle this. One way would be to have very little organic stuff going on and being much more centered and focused on promotion and selling front end type of like diet, fitness, workout routine type stuff, and using that then to have people ascend into a coaching program and having pretty clear metrics of what you can spend for a front end acquisition based on the percentage of people that buy the back end, right? And so that's a pretty straightforward formula. That is keeping the business as simple and straightforward as possible, but other things can be done, right? Like Wes Watson, for example. Wes has a huge following on YouTube and Instagram. And so he has this organic presence that powers people applying for joining a monthly kind of continuity program and ascending into a high-priced, personalized coaching program one-on-one. And that's a great model if you can lock down a channel where you start growing a following. So Wes has it on YouTube. I'd say Katrina Ruth, who came from fitness, who's now just an internet business type guru in Australia, her primary is Facebook for the most part and Instagram. You have to pick a channel if you want to go more the organic route. Ideally, though, if you want to keep the business as simple as possible, it's much more about buying customers through some kind of acquisition vehicle, knowing that some percent are going to ascend into the one-on-one type stuff. So that subsidizes your cost of acquisition. Until you have a business that can acquire people, customers by advertising, so you really can control the flow, you don't really have like a business. And so that's ultimately what you want to work towards. Having a presence on a channel is a doable model if you have a big personality, if you are more vulnerable than most or more authentic than most, but something that has people, when they get exposed to you, some group of people lean in and want to know more. Wes certainly has that coming from the California State Penitentiary. Katrina has that by her like vulnerability and authenticity. So you have to have something, some it factor if you're going to make that work, or you have to just be a font of incredible information. Harder to do on that side. But if you're asking me what is the most important thing to focus on, the most important thing to focus on is some kind of offer that allows you to get customers, generally at ideally at break even or better, but probably not going to happen. And then some way of ascending some group of them through upsells, backends, whatever, so that you're getting people into the coaching program basically for no cost. And then therefore it can give some of the acquisition back to the front side, if that makes sense. But happy to have you on Steal Our Winners, Craig. Hi, Rich. How would you follow up on leads for a service like stretch mark removal? People are interested but won't schedule a free session. I think I need them to link more pain. Okay. Well, the first thing that most people don't know, just in general, is that leads go stale very quickly online within minutes. Big difference in conversion rates between someone who's contacted a minute after they filled out a form versus 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or an hour. And I would assume that these are already somewhat older leads. The stretch marks, I guess it depends on what the solution is and what will people ultimately be charged. Now, when I had my hypnosis centers, people would always want to call and just say, how much is it? And we would never give price over the phone. And that's primarily because we were expensive. And to just throw out a number, what good does that do us? It doesn't do us any good whatsoever because you don't know how to value things. And so we always had a free consultation at our office. And one of the things that I did when I was testing out different ads and things like that was looking at premiums, info products, right, that I could give away for free when people showed up for the free screening, so that I was bribing people to come in. We ran full page ads on like the Daily News. People would call in. A lot of people would try and get price then, but we wouldn't give it. We got about 95% of the people who called in to book an appointment. Of course, getting people to show up for the booked free appointment was a whole nother thing. In Manhattan, we battled to get to 50% show up rate, confirming, doing everything. But we had a 80% close rate, 70 to 80% close rate when someone came into our offices. So if we got them into the office, good chance we were going to sell them. So then it became all about like, how do we incentivize people to actually show up for their free screening? And a lot of times we did that with premiums. So that's something to think about for yourself, right? What else can you add to the pot for them to come in for the consult? And if they don't want to come into for the consult, I think you have to probe as to why. What are they afraid of? What are they thinking is going to happen? And seeing if you can mitigate those things going forward by removing those as possibilities for future people who go through this process, whatever that looks like. I wouldn't imagine that. I don't know that you can amp up the pain that much on stretch marks. Maybe you can. We're going into winter time. Most people will have their stretch marks covered. Generally, your stretch marks are in places that you're not revealing to the world on a pretty consistent basis. So I would say that it's more about incentives than it is about intensifying the pain. Hope that helps, Marlon. What gives you mental clarity? Is it vision, goals, exercise, reading, writing, healthy food, social interaction, traveling? And how can someone integrate it into his life to become a habit? I would say that probably what gives me more mental clarity than anything else is writing in my journal. And it's in the interaction between myself and myself that gives me that clarity. I would say, though, I think most people are more isolated than they should be, myself included. I think that I really enjoy spending time with friends and I don't do enough of it. And I think that that is very valuable. Nowadays, with me, just to be autobiographical and maybe be somewhat transparent, I don't have enough friends around here that I've cultivated. And so what often happens is that when I have downtime, I don't make the most of it. And then what occurs for me, because I haven't made the most of my downtime, is that when it's back to work again, I don't feel like I've really gotten a break. And so for me personally, I get the best mindset and therefore potential for clarity when I have the chance to fully step away for a period of time. It doesn't have to be a long time. It could be 4 hours or 6 hours or something like that. But where I've truly not thought about business, I've had a good time, I've been in the present moment, etc. Right. And that's always easier to do with friends than without friends. So there's that. I tend to work out a lot these days, jumping rope, stuff like that. But I'd say that more than anything else, it's friendships and journal writing are the two primary things that kind of keep me at peace. And a lot of times, like, I will start something in my journal, like I think I did last night, that I haven't been back to it yet, so I don't remember specifically, but I started to unpack some bigger questions about what is it that I truly want for the next year? What is it working in my life? What do I want to be different? Am I willing to do what is required for things to be different? And what does that really look like? And so those kind of bigger topics, those kind of bigger things that can set the trajectory of your life, I tend to have those conversations with myself in my journal over an extended period of time. When I was writing in my journal last night about this, I wasn't writing in my journal last night to get to answers. I was writing in my journal just to surface the questions. I'm sitting at my house last night. I had already jumped rope 11,000 jumps yesterday. The kids were out. Kim was out shopping. I was home alone. And I didn't like that feeling of being home alone and not having anyone to call or hang out with or whatever. And so I took that time and decided to write my journal. And I said, I'm home right now. I finished my day. And I wish that there was something other than what I'm doing right now. Then that starts to unpack. Well, what would I like to be different right now? I wish that there were a few people I could call upon to do something fun. What have I done in my life that has prevented that from being the opportunity right now? And where I got to last night was a question that I don't know the answer to, and I got to write a lot more about it to determine that. Close friendships require quite a bit of headspace and commitment. And I have to ask myself, is that something that I'm willing to do? Yes, I certainly want the ability to call on close friends when I have downtime. But in order to have that, you have to be a good friend and you have to stay in touch with people on a consistent basis. Am I wanting this without having to, but unwilling to do that to get this? And that's a question now that will just sit in my journal, and I'll reflect upon that until ultimately I come to some kind of conclusion, and then I will set the trajectory. So for stuff like that, Hamza, I'm constantly revisiting what my thoughts are and trying to get increasing clarity on it. I don't know if that makes sense to you. And I don't know if I went down like a path that doesn't, but that's what works for me. It's about really surfacing the questions and not being in any hurry to get to the answer, but really marinating on the question quite a bit. Hey, Rich, do you have the same passion for what you do now as you did 10 or 20 years ago? Yeah, I have the same passion or I wouldn't be doing it. So let's first start there. My whole life, I've always followed whatever I was passionate about because I'm too much of a fuck up. All bullshit aside, I am not very good at getting myself to do things I don't want to do. I am extremely good at working hard on things I want to do. So because of that and recognizing that about myself, I have always moved from thing to thing to thing based on whether I was passionate about it. And so in 2012, when I left internet marketing, I had become less passionate about it. So I needed to step away and I was hoping to find something else. What I realized was that was really my midlife crisis and nothing was going to be fulfilling. It was really some internal shit that I had to work out. But I would say, yes, when it comes to Iggy and the new AI platform, and I really do think that this is going to be my legacy project, I'm extremely passionate about that. But what I would also say is that how that passion shows up is a little bit differently than how it used to. I used to go days without sleep. I used to have a relentless commitment to the outcome. And I would say that I don't have that same myopic focus anymore. I can't rally that level of commitment anymore. I mean, I'm in my 50s now, so I'm not in my 20s or 30s. I don't have the same raw endurance, even though I'm in better shape now. My body's older and I just can't do the same things. So I'd say that, yes, I'm as passionate today. And if I wasn't, I'd be doing something else that I was that passionate about. But even being that passionate about things, it's not like I was in my 20s. When I was in my late 20s and early 30s, which is really when I started my online career, most of my friends thought I was going to die early. Jeff Walker and all those guys. I was 250 pounds. I was not healthy and I was not sleeping. I'm a lot healthier now, but my ability is not the same. So I am as passionate, but less so from a physical side. Hi, Rich. I've built a funnel based on your demand creating tips and it works great for Google ads, but not on Facebook. Do you have any advice on how to make a funnel work on a different medium? Well, Martin, I would say that trying to get something to work on Facebook right now is much more difficult. So be aware of that. I would say that you'd be better off trying to make YouTube work right now than Facebook work right now. I would say that for I've heard some very interesting stuff in the past week about certain ways to make Facebook work a lot better. And that will be in this month's Steal Our Winners. Had a great call with Jordan Menard where he laid out some stuff that was pretty mind blowing. It's one of those Steal Our Winners that I sent to a bunch of friends as soon as the episode was done. And so that'll be out this month. Charles Kirkland also had a similar story. We haven't recorded his Steal Our Winners yet, but there are certain ways to make Facebook work better, and I'll leave it to them to explain how. I would say that without that stuff, though, you should definitely be on YouTube. Facebook is just more difficult to make things work on right now, whereas with YouTube, it's a lot easier. So you should be there first and then go back to Facebook. What is the healthy definition of success? Why not most people are successful? It's a widespread mental virus idea in the market leading people to failure. This is a big question, Hamza, but I'm glad you asked it. So I think everyone has to have their own definition of success. If you don't define what success is for you yourself, you're chasing something that someone else has determined is your prize. And I don't like that at all. So I think defining success has to be very unique to you personally. What does success mean to you? And because it's not what society has determined is success, it's what you've determined is success. Is it waking up when you want to wake up, doing what you want to do? That's not the same thing as growing $100 million business, because growing $100 million business means that you're not going to wake up at the time you want, and you're going to have to do things that you don't want to do, be it meetings, do this, do that. So you have to define first and foremost how you're going to define success. I'm much more about impact, right? And I'm much more about having a life that matters, that like, because I existed, the world is better, that the people around me are better, that the people that interact with my business are better. So that's my definition of success, is much more in line with that as opposed to a number or some figure, right? Or a size of my business. Like, I really could care less about that kind of stuff. And I think it's also partly informed because Kim, my girlfriend, right, she retired from Bank of America and Merrill Lynch, where she was very senior, and most of her or all of her clients were billionaires. And when I got to meet them, I wouldn't have traded my life with their lives. So their definitions of success, very different than mine. They were all more successful, quote unquote, like financially than me, significantly more, but I wouldn't trade my life with them. And so the way they designed their life, I was not envious of that. And that's why, first and foremost, everyone has to have their own definition of success. I remember reading this one book that I really enjoyed. I don't remember the author, but it was called Success Intelligence. And the whole first part is you got to define what success means to you personally. That was a really good book. When it comes to success, that was the first book I read that really convinced me. Until I come up with my own definition, it's BS. All right, let's see. Impactful books on irresistible offers, landing page copy, funnel strategies need to get my conversion rate up to the sky. Okay, so let's see. Herd was a good book. Okay, Herd, How to Change Mass Behavior. Great book on, the social dynamics. Perfection of Marketing. Great book for any coach that wants to learn that one moment in time where the purchase decision actually is made. Accidental Genius is all about how to write your way to getting outside the box, Hamza. So that would be a good book. Accidental Genius by Mark Levy. He's a good friend of mine. After Image is a great book about like advertising as it relates to the future. I like that book a lot. Let's see here. Architecture of Persuasion. That's a Mark Ford book. Autoresponder Madness. One of the best courses out there on how to use storytelling and emailing to be effective. Really good marketing book there. Let's see. Believe Me, Needing a Bigger Story. That's a good book. Forbidden Keys of Persuasion. I've mentioned that book a bunch of times. So that one is really good. Blueprint to a Billion was the book that was what influenced me to influence Mark Ford, Michael Masterson to write Ready, Fire, Aim. So breakthrough advertising, I've mentioned a gazillion times. For those that want to go deeper into how to create demand, this won't necessarily tell you, but it's parallels a lot of the stuff that I believe in, and that's Clout, the art and science of influential web content. For those that are interested in transformation and ontological type coaching and stuff like that, Coaching the Human Soul 1, 2, 3, and 4 by Alan Sear is really, really good. Elements of Persuasion was a good book. I like that book. Email by the Numbers was a good book. E-Marketing Strategies for the Complex Sale. Anything by Ardath Albee is good. She's more corporate, but E-Marketing Strategies for a Complex Sale was really good. Looking down this list, where are the ones that I really wanted to tell you about? Flip the Funnel and Flip the Script. I think both are Arn Claff, aren't they? Let's see. So those are both really good books. Getting to Plan B, one of my favorite books on business, and it's all about the importance of business model and how that's the highest leverage point in any business. So Getting to Plan B. Gimme is a good book on marketing. I'm passing through all the mental stuff, like there's Herd, right? How to Change Mass Behavior. Let's see. How Customers Think. That's a good book. Any of the books by that gentleman, I forget his name, are really good. Anything by How to Win an Argument, forget his name, but the trial lawyer, that's extremely good. Immediate Fiction, great book on writing. Incredibly good book on writing, probably one that you haven't heard of. Made to Stick, obviously anyone in marketing should read that. Metaphorically Selling, phenomenal book. In private conversations that I've had with Cialdini, with Dan Ariely, there is nothing more powerful than metaphors for persuasion. So something to think about there. Okay. My Life in Advertising and Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins. If you haven't read that, you should. Neuromarketing. Anything related to neuromarketing, generally pretty good. Let's see. Nonviolent Communication. That's just a great book for communication, period. And also great for anyone in a relationship. One to Many was really good by Jason Fladline. Paid Attention by Faris Jacob. Faris Jacob is a great marketer, someone to follow. Believe it or not, Pre-Sale Mastery. Great. I forget the guy that wrote that, but very good. I can always circle back to any of these later. Reimagining Change is probably one of the best books. I'm going to open that. We might go back to that at some point. Sales Seduction by Rondalyn Korolak. Believe it or not, good book. I was surprised that it was a good book. So Sales Seduction and Why Do You Say Yes? Good book, especially for marketing. Hamza, you asked me about thinking outside the box. This book, Seeing What Others Don't by Gary Klein. That's another good book about that. Spent. This is a really interesting book about evolutionary psychology and marketing. Straight Line Leadership is just a great book for anyone that's running a business. Subliminal is interesting by Leonard Mlodinow. Tested Advertising Methods by John Caples. I really like The 50th Law. I thought that was really good. That's by Robert Greene. I like all the 80-20 books. The Adjusted American is if you really want to understand why people do the things they do. That's a really interesting book. You probably won't hear that book mentioned by anyone else. I got just a few more here. I love books about con men and stuff like that. I find there's an overlap to marketing, even if you're doing it ethically. So I like books on that, like The Confidence Game by Maria Konnikova. Phenomenal book. Amazingly good book. The Business of Belief by Tom Asaker. Great book. I love The Creative Curve. That's another one to think outside the box. The Idea Hunter. That's another one, Hamza, thinking outside the box. Last Word on Power by Tracy Goss. That's more like the ontological coaching stuff that I'm into. The Culture of Desire. I like that book. The books by Adrian Slawotsky. Those are all good books. They're all about different profit models. This one's a Profit Zone. Best book on writing I ever read, Barbara Minto's Pyramid Principle. Clayton Makepeace's Big Binders that Tony Flores and him wrote. The Wisdom of Psychopaths, really good book too. This Is Why People Buy Your Product, really good book. Unconscious Branding by Douglas Van Prate, really good. Just a total random book recommendation that I loved. Was a real page turner, learned a lot about psychology and philosophy, was When Nietzsche Wept by Irvin Yalom. Irvin Yalom is a psychologist that developed group therapy, but he's also a novelist. And so he wrote this fictional story of what if Freud was Nietzsche's therapist. And so really, really good book. I learned a lot from that book and I really enjoyed it. Win Your Case, that's by that same most winning trial attorney ever. Forget his name. Wizards of Ads, Words That Work by Frank Luntz. Hopefully that's enough. Let's go back to me. So when it comes to irresistible offers, if you're a coach, LS, the most important thing is really getting inside the heads of your prospects. And if you're a coach or a consultant or someone who works with people, then the perfection of marketing kind of lays up the kind of questions that you would need to ask to get the answer that's probably most important. If you're not a coach, though, then I don't know that those questions are going to matter to you because you're not going to get the interaction, but still good book to take a look at. What metrics would you track if you were doing organic lead generation on Instagram, sending DMs? Well, you're reaching out and sending like unsolicited DMs, then I'd have a bunch of different messages from a bunch of different avatars, see which ones get the most response. Then from there, you just got to track the conversion process and then look at each metric and what variables determine that metric. So if you're going and DMing a bunch of people, certainly the avatar that you're using to DM is going to be important. And that initial message of what shows up before you click and see the whole thing is really important. So those are the variables that you got to play with to see what amount of response rate you get. So that's going to be critical. Then the next thing is you've gotten someone to respond, like what percentage of the people that you get to respond actually take it further, get into dialogue, and then will take whatever next step, fill out an application, book a call, like whatever. So it's about really breaking down the process, however you're doing it, which I don't know, and looking at the metrics that kind of then allow you to see where are you leaking the most, what can you potentially focus on that would grow it the most, like the flow through this funnel. That's how I would look at it, Stas Ray, that's a cool name. If you had to choose between a person going to university or learning through hands-on job for marketing and copywriting, what would you take into account for making the decision? Well, I would say that the purpose of a university education is not that. So if you want to be a copywriter or a great marketer, you're much better off being a protege or working as an intern or something like that. All my kids are going to college. They're not going to college for that reason, though. They're going to college so they can be better, well-rounded people. I certainly did not know anything about philosophy, history, or any of those things when I went to college. And I'm very pleased that I got my worldview expanded when I was in college. Now, college is different nowadays, but certainly I don't think there's any job that you're more prepared for from college than you would be by taking that amount of time and just being out in the field for the most part. Obviously, when we're talking about being a doctor or something like that, that's not possible. But generally, a university education is not about job performance or anything of that ilk. It's more about maturity, worldview, and stuff like that in general, I'd say. But I'd also say that I learned accounting in college, and that was certainly valuable to me in business. And certainly I am more comfortable in business having that accounting background than someone who doesn't have it. I didn't go to college so that I could become an accountant. I studied accounting so I could be better at business. And I think that it was effective for that. And it made me more well-rounded. So I'm a fan of university education, but not for the purposes of getting a job. And nowadays, even that's suspect because people are being indoctrinated in college. But fortunately, my kids haven't been yet. Hey, Rich, I just had a financial milestone that seems fairly unreachable a few years ago. Cool. Do you have any advice on how to shift the mindset from chasing money to managing money? I don't, because I've never really chased it, I guess, is my thing. But congratulations, Alex. And if you're a hunter, you might want to have someone else handle managing the money so you can just keep going out there. Just something to think about. Why some people are prosperous like you, while a lot of people have a hard time creating value. Is it a scarcity versus abundance? Is it enjoyment of helping others? And how can someone be prosperous? It's a great question, Hamza. I'm not really sure. And if you were to talk to my girlfriend, Kim, she would say I should be 10 times more successful than I am. But it's just never been my key driver. I think there's a lot of stuff that's in there. There's self-esteem issues, like can you really charge X? And there certainly is that. Are you entitled to Y? Are you stuck in society's way of looking at things? Society is not designed for most of us to be prosperous. That's not the way society is designed. And so if you are a cog in the wheel of the world, then odds are you will not be prosperous. You have to remove yourself from I don't know what to call it except the thrust of humanity and be willing to think for yourself and to be willing to believe in what you believe in. And so for me, that's been an evolutionary process, I guess. And no one can dictate how I'm going to live my life except for me. And I'm going to set it up within the confines of how I define success, et cetera. Right. So I think that most people don't define success. Most people have never really sat back and thought about it. They haven't then thought about their life and how they're going to align their life to achieve that level of success. And that it's not front forward, like it's not the thing that they focus on a continual basis, and it needs to be, especially if they're not there yet. And so I would say that that's probably the primary reason most people don't know what's possible, and therefore they're confined into thinking a certain way. I was fortunate that my dad was an entrepreneur, even though he was a ruthless SOB. But as an entrepreneur, he lived life on his own terms, and I saw that. And so I never bought into you have a job and you go 9 to 5, and that's how life is lived, because I didn't see my dad live that way, even though my mom did as a school teacher. So I think for many people, they have to get to a place where they realize that there are many different paths to whatever outcome they're pursuing, and that there's a lot more flexibility than most people realize. I don't know if that is explaining it the right way, Hamza, but that's what comes to mind. Doing a program called 16 Weeks of Hell, added with a reading of a couple books per week and mental training. Halfway now, been buying programs from many of the gurus to learn shortcuts from them. What programs with you will give some great shortcuts and beliefs in myself to take the step to market myself as a digital marketer? I'd say that really the best thing that you can do is doing the thing. Like, forget about buying other people's stuff or my stuff for a second. You want to get good at something, you got to start doing the thing. The best way to learn is learn by doing, right? So that means that if you're going through a program, the program is to your left, your computer is right there in front of you, and as you learn, you do. And that's where confidence gets raised. There's only so much learning you can do without doing. And it's the doing part that kind of cements that learning and also opens up where the learning have holes, because now you have a question or something like that. What gives you confidence doing a thing is doing the thing. And I would say that you can start on the smallest level and then grow from there. So it's like, can you write a good post on Instagram or something like that? Then can you write a good email? Can you write a good sales letter? Can you write it? So it's stepping it up. But I would say that the more practice you have, the better off you are, Mikhail. It's like people will go out there pursuing cures for procrastination, not recognizing that the pursuit of cures for procrastination is procrastination. And at the end of the day, like, the only thing that's going to move things forward is doing the work. And so the time spent trying to find the solution to procrastination is part of the procrastination problem. And so same here. There's only so much that you can learn in a vacuum without doing. And the sooner that you can get into action, the better learning happens. I signed up for SOW question. There are a lot of great tactics and strategies, but I'm struggling with identifying a business model that is not saturated. I would be less worried about business models that are or aren't saturated, and where do you feel like you yourself come into the equation with some kind of advantage. Steal Our Winners will give you an advantage from a marketing standpoint. So you're handled on that. You've got that covered. But then stepping it up for a second from the business standpoint, what gives you an advantage? So I'm not saying that someone else couldn't do Steal Our Winners, although we already now have a 2-year head start. But part of Steal Our Winners that allows us to do it, which would be more difficult for others, is the vast network that I have and my reputation. So I'm able to get people to be willing to share strategies with me that others wouldn't. And so that becomes another advantage that we have in the marketplace as we do the thing. So it's much more important that you figure out what you have an advantage towards than where you think there's a hole in the market, personally, unless you're doing funded type stuff. And I'd also recommend, I don't know your name, Vibrant Health Smarts, but I posted in the Facebook group, there are 2 reports. I know at least, maybe there's more, because I think I also put the core concept in there. So there's a few reports in there, but I'm pretty certain besides the hidden obstacles of success, I think I also put the very first founders report, which is your business blueprint, not to be confused with my business blueprint. My business blueprint was everything that we did our first year in business to go from 0 to 7.4 million. But your business blueprint was the first report I wrote for Founders Club. And that's the most recent thing I've written about my perspective about business. And in there, just see if I can find it real quick. All right, I found it. All right, so I'm going to read you that, but I will get back to that in a second. I have a couple things I want to show you guys based on different stuff that we've already talked about. Hello, Priya in Israel. Hi, Rich. How has iOS affected your Facebook ROAS, and what have you done differently, if anything? Smart money is moving off of Facebook to YouTube, period, right? If you want to know what I recommend, that's what I recommend. Hi, Rich. Many times we're learning new things, trying to set them up. Not sure if it will work. How do you go through this without overwhelm and be productive while having some personal balance? Yeah, that's tough. I would say that I try to cut things up as small as humanly possible. And what I mean by that is that the smaller I can make an experiment, the happier I am, if that makes sense. In other words, I want to do the least and learn the most. Great point, Rich. Do you have a chosen avenue for media buying right now? I think YouTube is the place to go. I think the next place will be TikTok. I think Twitter has some good possibilities, and we did steal our winners. 2 different steal our winners last month on Twitter advertising, which was interesting. So that's what I would say, Cam. Business models seem to have the same life cycle as levers. Kindle books, Amazon, Facebook ads seem past the juicy stage. What are new hot business model opportunities? This is exactly why I want to get you this. Son of a bitch. Hold on. What the hell is going on? So, Vibrant Health Smarts, I have your answer. Just bear with me a few minutes and then I will get back to it. Hi, I'm a Reiki healer for pets. Wow, that's a small niche. And people who have had advanced healing results and would like to know how to get 3 to 5 clients a day. So, I actually help people and switch to a full-time helping people and animals heal. It's a 40 and a half hour. It's 40 a half hour, 80 an hour price range until I'm well known and could be worth a lot because of advanced healing abilities. Also connecting with other services to offer psychic massage, light language to add. Dave, that's a tough thing to sell. You're going to have to figure out, like, how do people know that they should be taking their pet for that? And then based on that, you have to, something convinced you that that's the solution. If you're selling it because you believe in it, not because you believe in it because you're selling it, right? But if you're selling it because you believe in it, something has led you to the conclusion that has led you to believe in it. Your prospects have not had those same experiences, so they haven't come to the same conclusion. They don't believe in it. So what is it that you've experienced that has led you to believe in it that your prospects and customers have not? And how can you accelerate their experience so that they come to that conclusion? If you look at the free reports I wrote or the webinars I've created, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create that, right? I'm trying to give people the same experience, come to the same conclusion in a much faster way than it took me to get to that same conclusion. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And that's what you want to try and do. If you actually have that kind of experience where you were convinced of something and now you want other people to experience it as well, that would be how I would go about it, right? So that's what advice, tactics, strategy for a copywriter or freelance looking to grow a business instead of a job. Get good, get a few clients, and be looking to create a long-term relationship with those clients. That would be a better question probably to ask Matt, since he has more experience as a copywriter. Not been a copywriter myself, except for my own stuff. I don't have as much advice for you on that, but what I would say is that the copywriters that make the most are the ones that have a few clients, they get a nice royalty, and they're able to help that business grow. They master that business and they understand that prospect and are the sales team for that business. I sure hope that you are an SOW lifetime member. If so, you are well stocked with access of what's working now. Thanks, Daryl, for saying that. As you're someone very successful, do you think the universe works mentally? Thoughts that influence matter instead of achieving goals? Goals find its way to you if you're mentally clear? Hamza, I don't know that I want to make any proclamations for the world, but what I would say is that my life works best when I experience synchronicity, when I assume things will work. I expect myself to be lucky. I do have a certain element of that, but I stay cognizant of why stuff wouldn't work. I think thoughts do influence matter, but not in the way of The Secret, but I think how you come off to other people is incredibly important. I decided to keep a journal this year because of you, and mainly so I can meet any marketing tasks. I finally start marketing January. Automatic share every time I hit your lives. Well, thank you, man. Appreciate you, Cam. Which is so genuine, heartwarming. Well, I appreciate that. I still want to find that answer for you. Finally, I got this book opened. So this was a report I wrote a gazillion years ago, but there's some stuff in here that I think would be useful, especially Vibrant Health Smarts for you. I'm very proud of this report. So Anyone that is trying to figure out how to get their business to work, I strongly recommend you read this. You can get it for free, so I'm not trying to sell you anything. So here you go. Let me read this to you. Lots of wannabe entrepreneurs are in constant search for the hot opportunity. The type of opportunity they're looking for at any given moment in time is determined by where they are in their evolution of their business. If they're just starting out, they're searching for the hot business opportunity, the perfect niche, the best business in a box, or the new untapped method to making millions. If they already have an online business, they're searching for the hot traffic opportunity, the killer conversion strategy, or anything else that promises the secret shortcut to eliminating what's currently holding them back. The thinking being, I'd imagine, that people who are successful in business are successful because they know something that everyone else doesn't. That somehow they know how to be there at the right time, picking the right thing to do before anyone else gets around to smelling the opportunity, before anyone else gets wind of it. In other words, what most internet marketers seem to believe about successful entrepreneurs is that they're opportunists, that they're successful because they can smell opportunity before anyone else can. The hot deal, the cutting thing, the inside track, the search engine loophole, the backdoor pay-per-click bidding strategy, the social media strategy that never fails, etc. Well, to be honest with you, I've never really trusted that thought because somehow the question, where's the hot opportunity, smacks of naivete. Even worse, it smacks of greed. It's the kind of question someone asks who's never really had to, nor been willing to, pay the price necessary to create an opportunity on their own. Somehow, the opportunity-seeking entrepreneurs have grown to believe that there are nuggets of success hiding out there in the world under rocks, that all they have to do is know which rock to turn over and the nuggets will be theirs. They believe that somehow that success is knowing which rock to turn over, that out there in the world is a sure thing just waiting to be discovered, and that an entrepreneur is someone who has a nose for discovering such sure things. In other words, the thinking goes, sure things are what success is made of. Find a sure thing and your success is. Well, my answer to these people has always been the same. The most successful entrepreneurs I know aren't opportunists. The most successful entrepreneurs I know are visionaries. And that a visionary is someone who sees an opportunity not by doing something different than everyone else is doing, but by doing exactly the opposite. The true entrepreneur sees the hot opportunity isn't doing what everyone else is doing, but doing it better than everyone else is doing it. Choose an ordinary business. Just pick a business where there's lots of competition, where there's lots of other people doing it, like most people do business, in an ordinary, careless, perfunctory, unresponsive, and thoughtless way. Then design your business to solve a bigger problem and an overlooked frustration, or the same problem as everyone else, but solved in a better, faster, more convenient, or cheaper way. And then do that business like crazy. I mean, whole hog plus postage. Do that business like no one else has ever done it before you. Choose an ordinary business and do that business in an extraordinary way. And that's the hottest business opportunity around. So this does not, just so that we're clear, this does not conflict with anything I'm saying about Steal Our Winners, because at the end of the day, Steal Our Winners is about tapping into a marketing strategy that gets your business in front of your customers or gets more of your stuff sold to those customers in some way. But at the end of the day, the business itself has to provide value, right? Like marketing is just an accelerant. It will get you there faster. But at the end of the day, the hottest opportunity is to do a business where you create value, but do it in a better way than what's out there. Look at Steal Our Winners. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, right? To me, it is, but I don't expect anyone else to necessarily think that. People have been learning online marketing forever. Well, not forever, but for the last 20 years. I wanted to do something different, right? The opportunity was created by me, by looking at what I felt was a better way to get access to tactics that work right now. I took an ordinary business teaching people marketing strategies, but did it in a different way. And now I am creating that way. And so my point to you, Vibrant Health Smarts, is don't be so concerned with what other people are doing. It's like what I used to tell people, like the problem I wrote the Internet Business Manifesto, then I quickly followed that up with the missing chapter. And the missing chapter was all about how most entrepreneurs pick the wrong business. And primarily I was taking aim at a lot of the people I learned from, a lot of my mentors and people that I learned a lot from in direct response, because the direct response, like way of doing business was find a need out there and fill it. And my point is that just because there's a need out there doesn't mean that you're the right person to fill it. If you want to get married, you don't go out there looking for the most desperate person to just propose to so that, like, now I'm married. You want to be married to the person that actually is worthwhile and you can have a lifetime relationship with. Now, even with that thought in mind, most marriages don't work. So if you're not thinking that seriously about what business to start, you're already off track. But who you decide to marry and what business to start are as significant. They're going to determine a lot for you. And just because there's a need, if you're not the right person to fill it, then you're setting yourself up for eventual doom and failure. Because at some point, even if you're the first person to fill the need, someone who is better, and if that is the right opportunity for, is going to come into that market and they're going to make your head spin. So you really want to find where you can provide more value, where ultimately, long term, you can work your way to being the perfect solution or the ideal solution for some segment, some avatar, some group of people in your market. Everything that I've tried to do in every business that I've ever been a part of is trying to make myself the absolute best solution for some group of people, so that I could honestly say that this is your best solution to some group of people, not to everybody, but to some group of people. So I wasn't looking for the stupid people in the market, because they'd have to be stupid to buy mine versus what else is out there. I don't want to be in that position. I want to be in a position where the smartest people buy my thing. So with that line of thinking, the world is a huge place and the internet connects the whole world together. So who can you absolutely be the best solution for? And that's subjective. That's not objective. Someone who's just starting out could make the case that there's someone who started out like last year online could set up, could market, I'm the best person to teach you because I've just done it. Whereas someone like Rich Sheffrin, who did it 20 years ago, he doesn't know like the ins and outs of how to get things off the ground like I do. And that will resonate with some group of people. You got to pick your spot, and then you got to create your rationale that will resonate with some group of people in your market, that you really are the ideal solution. And so that's what I'm getting at Vibrant Health Smarts. This report is called Your Business Blueprint, Business Success by Design. You read a book from beginning to end, but you build a business from the end to the beginning. And this was Founders Club report number 1. This is one of the things I wanted to recommend. And this is available to all of you for free, something we used to charge for and should charge for because it is that good. And I think it will give you a new perspective. The other thing that I'll just tell you that I'm really proud of that I've never seen done anywhere else, it has you figure out what it is you want out of your life, what it is that your customers want out of their life, because you're trying to find the intersection of those things. But the other part that I really liked about this that I've not seen anywhere else is I walk you through what a profit model is, trying to put together your offer correctly, right? And then what I like is this idea, because this is how you really get free of a business, right? So this is putting together everything that needs to be done in the business in order for this profit model to be executed. And why would you want to do that? Because then you're turning business into a game. And the game is that you color code that mind map based on who's responsible for getting that task done. And the goal of business is to get your color off the mind map. And when you get your color off the mind map, guess what? You have a business that is independent of you, that can grow without you. And now you have really fulfilled the role of entrepreneur. And so that's what that first report is all about. And like I said, you can get it for free in our Facebook group. So it's there waiting for each and every one of you. So now let me share this other book, though, that I really enjoyed. And for many of you, I don't think you will have ever heard of it. It's called Reimagining Change. That's the title. And it's really a book for, what would you call it? Progressives. It's looking at narrative, which is like the structures of basically story-based stuff, and looking at how social movements are built, and looking at like in marketing, right? People have before you enter into the picture, they have a predetermined way of dealing with things, right? You as a marketer are trying to disrupt that and have them buy your thing as opposed to buying nothing or buying something else. So there's already a story in place. The better that you can identify that story and disrupt that story, the more successful you will be if you can replace the current story with your story, right? Your story of the solution, your story of how they get success. And so this book that is really more for politics and radicals and things like that is, I find, very, like, I read this book over a decade ago, I think, but very, very valuable. And it's called Reimagining Change. This, I wouldn't say, is for any beginner marketer. This is Consent Theory of Power. This is a very heavy duty book, but it's a short book, believe it or not. And it's not written for marketers. So you have to be aware of that. But if you are a lateral thinker and can read in another field and apply it to your own, then you're going to find that this is a very powerful book. So just Reimagining Change is the name of that. All right, let's keep it going. All right. The idea of servicing the question is huge. It's incredibly underrated and hardly ever talked about when it comes to problem solving. But personally, that's something I do a lot, man. Glad to hear someone else talk about that. Yeah, look, I will ponder the problem and what's the best way to define the question for a considerable period of time. I'm in my 60s, but mentally in my 30s. Well, I'm immature. I don't know if that counts. So what is the difference between strategy and tactics and principle? Well, a principle is timeless, right? People will want things that they can't have, like scarcity. So that's a principle. The tactic might be to limit the supplies. There can be many different tactics to leverage the principle of scarcity. A strategy is more all-encompassing. Strategy is recognizing that there's not an unlimited amount of resources. Strategy is about understanding what the outcome is that you're pursuing and what's the least amount of resources that I need to acquire that outcome, right? And that's what being strategic is all about. The least amount of use of resources to get what is desired. That's why the worst question that an entrepreneur can ask is, what else can I do? Because that screams of being non-strategic, right? It's what's the least that I can do to get the outcome. And this is not talking about why to be lazy. It's just that you can always do more, right? The question is, what's the least that can be done to get that outcome? Strategy is all about that. Underneath that, you'll leverage tactics to get there. Those tactics will be based on principles because the principles never change. Hopefully that helps. What strategy tactics would you recommend for a talented freelancer to grow their skill into a business? What model offers work best for you or work best? Well, my favorite, and that's a very specific question, so I can give you a very specific answer. My favorite model is service to product, because it allows you to start selling immediately, gives you feedback immediately, and then in the delivery of the service, you can be creating the product. Every program I ever created, I sold as a service first. I sold as a live coaching program. And so it was a service. I didn't need to create anything at first to sell it. I could just sell it. Then in the delivery of the service of the coaching program, I was creating the product, but I was getting paid all the way through, and I was getting feedback because I was doing it live. Then when I was finished with it, I could then sell it as a product. So service to product is what I believe is the best way to get to where you want to go. And one of the other reasons why is that if you can't sell the service, guess what? You're not going to be able to sell the product. So better to have zero investment in the product at first and just try to sell the service, because that'll give you very accurate feedback. And then if you're able to sell the service, guess what? You're getting paid to create the product, which is an ideal place to be for any freelancer. Hey, Steph, glad that you appreciate my lives, and I appreciate that you're here. Hey, man, I like your definition of success better than the idea of a $100 million business. Yeah, I've never wanted to have a $100 million business. I'd much rather have a $5 million business that has a $2 million profit. Much easier to manage, to each their own, right? Some people peg their ego to a number. That's not for me. I value freedom over that more. How to advertise Kindle books. Amazon did not work. They even blocked the sale of at their own admission while they took the advertising money. Facebook ad failed miserably with $12 profit margins on a $35 Kindle book. Peter, I would look at the excess inventory of Amazon and bid on keywords that no one is bidding on. Use your book as make sure the title is big on it. That's how I would go about it. Or you have to go a completely different route, which would be more you have to create an audience outside of Kindle and then push them to Kindle, which is a much longer discussion. Robert Holden is the guy that wrote Success Intelligence. That's correct. I want to improve my salesmanship skill. What should I focus on, strategy or tactics or principle? Vivek, if you want to improve your sales ability, the best thing to do is to try and sell, however that has to go down. A lot of the top copywriters of all time have had one-on-one sales experience as well, because you really get to understand the psychology. So I'd say that is valuable. Learning how to sell on the phone. There's nothing wrong with getting a job to get experience to get to your final outcome, right? I think I've shared this before, that before I opened up my hypnosis centers, there was one hypnosis center that existed in the United States. It was in Virginia Beach. It was called Positive Changes by Patrick Porter. He later went on to franchise and do different things like that. But when I first came across him, he had none of that. And I offered to come work for him and pay him to work for him so I could learn the business. That time, the month and a half I spent working for him in Virginia Beach, probably shortcutted my success by a decade. I got the value of his 10 years worth of experience in a month and a half. And then I went back to New York and applied it. So I would say that you can learn more about selling by selling than anything else. And I'm not a great salesperson. I became a great marketer to compensate for my inability to sell. Maybe it's the right place, right time, but this live stream really speaks to me today, man. Thanks for all you do. Well, cool, Cam. I appreciate you. Okay. How to overcome self-doubts. When the pandemic started, my business became volatile. Overall, I am profitable. When I have a bad week financially, I start to get self-doubt and nothing gets done. That's interesting. I find it the other way. Like when I'm too happy, nothing gets done. When I'm worried, things get done. I don't know if this is the case or not, but having a padding so that like daily disruptions don't bother you is one thing. Also, it's about looking at like sales are a lagging metric, right? What precedes sales? People on your list, what happens way earlier in the process. That's what you want to be looking at. And those are the numbers that you should be most concerned about, not the numbers at the end of the process that you have less control over. You have control over, but it takes many days to see a difference there as opposed to something further up front. And so if you focus on that, then you have less reason to be as concerned because the pipeline is there. From a business startup perspective, what would your recommendations be for the person wishing to disassociate himself personally from the business and be entirely brand centric? I don't know why you would want to do that, Kevin. I think it's much easier to start a business based on a personality to start than it is to build a brand. A person is just going to be much more recognizable, much easier for people to associate. Building a brand takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of investment. And so the better path, in my opinion, like if we're starting from scratch, we're just talking about entrepreneurs, not lots of funding and stuff like that, is to start. You can always have a brand, but you should build your personality out too, because your personality is going to be driving the brand in the beginning. And it's like Agora is a $2 billion business. No one knows Agora, right? But they know a lot of the personality, but Agora is a personality driven business. It's just that the personalities are out front, right? And there's a benefit to having a brand. I'm not discounting that. But to build a brand takes a long time. And you're going to get a personality built a lot faster. And then you can transition. But to start that way and try and build a brand out of the gate is pretty difficult. What's the gist of an ontological approach to education, and what's your approach to education? I'll give you my perspective. We all have a perspective, and part of adult education is altering that perspective. So when I did transformation workshops at my office, and I only did 3 of them, the whole goal was to break the point of view of someone and then alter it to be more in line with the outcomes that they wanted. And I would say that an ontological approach is recognizing that who you're being has tremendous impact on how things play out. And that who you're being is a function of how you hold yourself personally, what you're thinking about, how you interact. There's a lot of layers to it. So there's elements of that. When we talk about ontological and being, it's coming from the work of Heidegger for the most part. And it is very much in line with the idea that we're all kind of thrown into a current of humanity. We're born and things exist already. Humans have been here a long time doing the things that humans do, and we're born into that. And there's a thrust already, right? So in the ontological world of education, they talk about how you have lots of choices, but no possibilities, right? Because choices have been defined by those that have preceded us. And new possibilities, like being able to think outside of that, requires a different frame, a totally different frame. And there is a lot more possible than what the choices are in front of you, but to be able to perceive them and to be able to execute and operate within them requires a shift in thinking. That shift in thinking doesn't happen naturally because we're all born into a system. And to break the thoughts of that system, kind of matrix like, right? We're born into this system and we have to break that apart. The world does not want us to be free doing our own thing. They want to, like, and there's no they, right? The situation, the way it's set up is for most of us to be cogs in a wheel. And that's not who I want to be. I'm sure that's not who you want to be. I'm not doing a great job defining it. I wasn't prepared for that, but that's my best definition for today. Thanks for your answer, Rich. I built a business around my brand. How can I be more okay with being on camera and building a business around my personality? Seems necessary for YouTube content creation. Either that, Martin, or you could have someone else be the spokesperson, right? I would love to get more people to be the spokespeople for Steal Our Winners as opposed to just me. So there's that, right? And I think it just comes with practice more than anything else. Part of me doing these live streams was just also for me to have more practice, getting more comfortable in front of camera. Like Gary Vaynerchuk and I used to be closer friends like early on, and Gary sucked on camera when he first started, but he's phenomenal on camera now. That didn't happen by accident. That happened because he did a daily video show for years. Like when nobody was watching, when people were watching, it didn't matter. And that's kind of practice. It's hard not to get good at something if you do it enough. And so I'd say that's what you got to be willing to do. I'm a copywriter. I want to know what additional skills I should add to my tool belt so that I can add more value to my clients. Just keep writing, Vivek. Keep writing, keep dissecting sales letters that have crushed it. Try and understand what the structure is of those. Why did they work? You can just spend all your time fixated on that and it will make you better. Rich, do you think I should integrate coaching for product e-commerce, or can I skip that altogether and get with a podcast, newsletter, and free downloads? It depends on what the e-commerce product is, but I know some big supplement companies, their primary is getting on other people's podcasts on a very consistent basis, and that's where they get their customers from. So I'm not sure if that's what you're thinking about, but just your own podcast is still more your own insular world, unless you're going out and doing a lot of guest interviews on a lot of other podcasts to bring people onto your podcast. There has to be some external outreach that allows you to bring people in, but I'm not sure if I'm thinking about it correctly or not based on your question. You may have covered this in your journaling streams. If so, apologies for missing it. Wondering, what is your review process of previous entries? Do you review your entries over the week, month, or is it the focus on the act of doing it and the thinking that arises in that moment? It's more the latter than the former. It's much more free flowing, but it's there. And I do go back, but not in any consistent way. On the Wisdom of Psychopaths book, How to Develop Fearlessness, Confidence, Charm, and Ruthlessness Without Being a Psychopath. Is this covered in the book? What are your tips? Yeah, it is covered in the book. I'll let the book do the talking. I was raised by a sociopath. So for me, I'm very familiar with that type, and it gives me goosebumps even thinking about it. How to recycle knowledge. I enjoy learning so much compared to teaching. What's your system to teach what you've learned? Well, that's why I use Evernote, right? Because I showed you in the past, I would just do research, and then that research would just sit on flashcards or index cards in a box and never be accessible again. Everything that I work on is in Evernote, even the stuff that I've done for all the live streams over the last year and a half or 2 years. A lot of that stuff is in my Evernote. Now, some of those were me just doing some readings on something I wanted to talk about during a live stream, but now it's there. It's in Evernote. And when I work on that topic sometime in the future, if I do, the work has already been done for me. So that's kind of the idea, right? And even just what I showed you, like coming up with book recommendations. It's a lot easier for me to just look at all my notes of books and then be able to pull them off. So it's leaving that trail behind you so that you can easily tap back into what it is that you've done before. But I'm not even anywhere near as great as I'd like to be with this stuff. Like if I was much more methodical and I had a good assistant, which I haven't found a good assistant yet, but ideally, right, if I had a good assistant, one of the things my assistant would be doing is getting the transcripts of every live stream I have, cutting away most of it, keeping the great ideas that I share in each one, that going in my Evernote. Hey, Rich, just wanted to know, what would you recommend for pricing of a beginner course? Would you say monthly sub or lower ticket one-off? Well, I think continuity is more difficult to sell overall than one-off. So in general, when you're first starting out, better to sell a one-off. Most people have false ideas about continuity. They think it's going to be magical. They think people are going to stick around forever. Those generally don't happen. You have to work very hard to keep people in. So better to get money up front in the beginning and then slowly build out continuity. If you're asking me, that would be the best way to start. Adam Kosloff, long time no speak, Adam. You've often talked about embracing the reality of uncertainty versus the illusion of security. What are some practical things you've been doing during COVID era to handle the ambient high levels of uncertainty at every front? Anything above and beyond your usual habits? Well, this is not going to make me popular, but I will just say that, like, I have always been much more willing to defer to my own body and what it's telling me than what anyone else is telling me. So early on in my life, like when I first got exposed to the Atkins diet back in the 80s, it worked for me. So this is before anyone was talking about keto. In fact, the AMA was trying to push Dr. Atkins out. And then 10, 15 years later, the world is caught up in the way I see it. I'm not claiming I'm right about this, but the way I see it, the world is caught up. So that, like, to me, has opened up a ton of stuff that I listen to my body more than anything else. That's only been confirmed throughout my life. Like, I used to do a lot of Diet Coke and chewing tobacco when I was in college, pulling all-nighters. But if I look at chewing tobacco, that's nicotine, Diet Coke, caffeine, other stimulants, this was all self-medicating because I had ADD and I didn't know it. So I trust my body. And as someone who trusts their body, I'm not someone who gets sick very often. So, and I work on my health like a madman. So I have not been one that's been too concerned about all these external issues. And I'm not vaccinated. Sorry, anyone who that offends. And I don't see the reason to be, because if I get it, I'm sure I'll get over it quickly. And I'd rather have the antibodies from the actual issue, the disease, than have an unproven vaccine. And for those of you who disagree with me, I totally get it. But I also have had experiences with, I think it was tetracycline. I had bad throat infections before I had my tonsils taken out as a kid. And they gave me tetracycline or amoxicillin. I don't remember which one it was. They found out years later that stains your adult teeth. When my teeth came in, they were all gray. I had to go to the dentist once a week. That's an antibiotic that was already vetted by the FDA. So I don't trust just because something's been approved that it actually is okay. And so that's my experience, because I had to go to the dentist every week for a year and a half as my adult teeth were growing in. So Adam, I've just grown to trust myself above and beyond everything. I don't care what a doctor says, unless it's a doctor that I know, that I trust, that I care, right? Like, I'm not interested. So for me, there's been no difference, because I don't listen to the outside world. I listen to what works for me. And I don't know, Adam, if that makes sense, but I think it does. I hope it does. Thank you, Rich. Question: what is the fastest way to grow an audience for a talk show, podcast, and YouTube in 2021? And how do you monetize it if I want to promote other people and their stuff? Well, I think you got to do one, then the other, right? And the fastest way to grow an audience for a talk show is to be great. And I wish I could tell you like how to be great. But if that was easy, then everyone would do it. And I certainly would do it. And look, I've got 60 people watching right now, not exactly shattering any records. So I would say define your target tight, go with what works. There was also a couple books, I think they were called, let me just look it up really quick. So Ready, Set, Talk was a book that used to be for radio. I guess they've updated it now, but it was like how to create a radio show. So Ready, Set, Talk is someone who's been in the game of setting up shows and getting them popular over the decades. So that would be a good place to start, April. I've got 3 past clients that I'm testing equity share deals on. One is completely new e-commerce affiliates startup site. How can I think about setting my percentage on this? Go. What you want to do is you want to set a percentage, but then I guess it depends on what your model is. One thing that I will tell you for sure, like the way Jay works or the way I've worked, where you get paid some ongoing thing for something that you've done to that business, like create a new profit center for them. No matter what you do, you have to give your clients a way of buying you out, because the alternative is that you're forcing them to eventually screw you. So this was something that Jay Abraham learned years and years ago. It's like, if I could help your business make an extra $1, would you give me 25 cents? People always say yes. And then when they start cutting you a check 2 years or 3 years after you did the work, and they're like, why am I still paying this? If they don't have a way to buy themselves out, they're going to screw you. And so you're forcing them to screw you. So what I would say, it's going to be different depending on the work level that you do. Oh, crap. I'm blowing off Perry Marshall for you guys. So that's what I would say. Go. And then as far as what percentage, whatever you can get really that you feel is fair. But I would give people the ability to buy themselves out of that at some point because they're not going to stay forever. I've done a lot of those deals. Like Jay and I used to take on clients, and our goal was to get paid $1 million. And so it was 4% of the upside. And so we'll increase your sales by 25 million. And when we do, we want 4%. So 4% of the increase in gross we want until we've been paid $1 million. And that was pretty effective, right? Not being tied to profit, just being tied to gross and making it very simple. I've done lots of deals like that, but those were limited, right? Like when the million was paid, we were done. So that's the process there. I don't think MLM is the best fit for me, but I'm wondering another business model. Hi, Rich. I've wasted a lot of money on courses and seminars. I've not received an ROI. What criteria or standards do you have before purchasing a course? Mudzi, I would say, and no offense to you, I think you got to get real. Okay. And since I don't know you and you don't know me, please don't take personally. But what I would say is that if you've had the experience like Mudzi, where you've bought a lot of stuff, but you haven't gotten the benefit from it, instead of blaming the stuff, which is really easy to do, very like psychologically keeps you safe, but it's really not probably the best way. So are there stuff that you bought that was scammy? Maybe. And if so, then you got to ask yourself, why did you believe that? If it was too good to be true, why did you buy into something that was too good to be true? But if it wasn't, and you didn't go through, you didn't do the work, you didn't do the thing, then you got to be looking at yourself, and then not like, you have to ask yourself the question of, what am I willing to do? And how can that better inform my purchases? What I've noticed as a reader, it's much more likely that I'm going to go through something if I have it in written form, if that written form is digital, so I can put it on my iPad. So I'm very clear of how it's best for me to consume the thing. And so that is part of it. But I'd say that you need to create your mode of action. Until you've created your mode of action, I'd be very suspect of buying more courses because you haven't figured out a way yet to translate information into action. And that's not the course's fault, although it might be. It could also be your fault. And so until you've figured out how to do that, right? Like there was a time in my life, this is a long time ago, but nonetheless, like where I just read like self-help book after self-help book. I didn't do any of the exercises. I just read self-help books. And then it occurred to me, like, what am I doing? This is just a waste of time. If I'm not willing to do the exercises, then what am I doing? If I was going to read more of these books, I had to figure out a way that I would do the exercises and actually get the positive impact that I was searching for. Until I could, there was no reason going out and buying more books. It just was purposeless. So I think that, let me just look at the question again. I think the standards have to come from yourself. And it's more about understanding how you put information into action. And then what's the best way for you to get that information? I hope that helps because I know the frustration. I've certainly been there myself in the beginning. How would you reach a market of college basketball teams if you had a program to help them be more successful through challenging assumptions, shifting mindsets, and working together? Well, I think the college basketball teams would probably be difficult. I'd start with high school teams. I'd try to develop a relationship with the coach. I'd try like a decision maker, and I think everything is a claim until you can back it up with at least one proof point. So for me, like I was able to point to my success offline as a proof point of why I could teach you how to grow your business online. Not a great proof point, but enough to get started. So you need to build a proof point. And that proof point might be a high school basketball team. It could be a college basketball team if you can get access to a college basketball coach, but you're going to need to get some buy-in. And that first person to take that chance is taking a risk. And so who can you get? I would try to do a sniper before I did a shotgun approach. Specific people that you are most likely to convince, because it's the first couple of people who are taking the biggest risk. How to forecast the future events, market trajectory. Is it by accumulating the vast amount of knowledge or by looking for patterns in the past? I think it's both, Hamza. It's about understanding history, knowing that most things work in cycles. It's about looking at what you think is going to happen when you hear the same thing from numerous sources, etc. How do you know some one is strategic thinking. If you weren't born as a strategic thinker, then how would you develop these traits in your personality? I think everyone is somewhat strategic. Anytime that you purposely asked your mom or your dad for something as a kid because you knew one parent was more likely to say yes than the other, that's being strategic. So we all are strategic thinkers. It's just a question of not being so overly attached to the present moment that you can't pull back and reflect, right? Like we had a post campaign dissection of the campaign that we just ran. And one of the things, like with this campaign, that I was apologizing to the team about was that I dragged my feet because I wasn't crazy about the idea of how we were going to sell it. And I was hoping that a better idea would occur to me. It didn't. Generally, it does. This time it didn't. So I found myself behind, and I was fighting now to get things done for something that I didn't believe was our best possible way of doing things, but time had run out. Because time had run out, I then was behind. And because I was behind, I was doing everything like trying to get things done. So I was in the forest and I could not pull back and see the trees because like I was too much in the day to day. And so it's very difficult to be strategic when you're in the thrust of things. And so for me, I couldn't be strategic because I was so in the weeds. And it's very difficult to do both. You can't be in the weeds and be strategic. Those have to be split up. Now, it could be the same person, but you have to then separate the time. Everyone can think strategically, but you have to be able to pull back and you have to be thinking like, what are the patterns here? Do you have any tips on staying in shape while under pressure and stress? Well, what really killed me and made me gain a lot of weight a long time ago was pulling all-nighters because then I was too tired the next day to exercise. I would say that going for walks, I like jumping rope, something that you can do for a minute here, a minute there is really useful. And that's why I like jumping rope so much. What are the 3 keys to copywriting? Empathy is probably number 1. The better that you understand the person that you're writing to, the more likely you are to convince them of anything. I'd say that, empathy, offer creation, and lastly, writing. Is there any specific marketing platform that you think may work best for getting clients to help them heal their pets or recover their health condition, COVID, or any? I'd say YouTube is probably the best, and you would focus on where those people are already. But YouTube is probably going to be the best place for someone who like yourself. Oh my God, so happy Rich answered my question. I've been struggling with it forever now. Massive breakthrough in my thinking and huge. I'll read that report and rewatch this. Huge thanks. You're welcome. That's why I do this. Wow, we're already going over here. That's freaking gold mine. The mind map. Thanks, Rich. You're welcome. Rich, what is the Facebook group you keep referring to? How do I join? It's called Strategic Profits. It's the name of my company, and it's free to join. I recommend reading along with Saul Alinsky. Yeah, Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radical. Really good stuff. I mean, you can learn a lot about marketing from stuff like that. Alinsky here is blasphemy. Well, I don't agree with his politics, but those methods work. And as a marketer, I'm interested in what works. And so I'm willing to study anything. And I can respect anyone that's intelligent, even if I totally disagree with their beliefs. Yeah, exactly. The best book I ever read on storytelling was called Bewitching the Modern Mind, which was all about the evils of storytelling that big business do. I love exposés of the tactics I use because generally I can learn a lot from it. The only reason to read Alinsky is in order to understand what the left is doing to the US. What a shame. No, that's not the only reason, Amit. The other reason is that it's an effective way of persuasion, coercion, and changing people's minds. And understanding that and what makes that work makes you a better marketer, period. Whether you agree or disagree with the politics, we're talking about what gets people to change their mind, what gets people to take action. And that's extremely valuable. I think it's a mistake. Just because you don't agree with the politics, I think as a marketer, you owe it to yourself to understand what makes people do the things they do and how can that be leveraged, period. Now, that doesn't mean that you will use all those tactics, but you should understand what makes them work. So Rules for Radicals, you should read that. Definitely. You should definitely read that. You should understand what makes people tick and what gets people to change their mind, what kind of propaganda works. The more you understand all of this, the better marketer you are. Yeah, many reasons to read it. No need to argue whether your reason is one of them, but certainly a lateral thinking tool for political strategy. Yeah, your favorite conservative strategists have all read it. I assure you. Totally agree, Gogo. You're 100% right there. So I agree. Not having much money to promote, aside from reaching contacts that already exist, what vehicle is best to reach out to a targeted audience? Facebook? Well, if you have a cool message and you are specific to who you want to reach out to, then one easy way is to see if there are Facebook groups that already are centered around that. Would the owner of that Facebook group allow you to do a live stream, like a Facebook live stream like this? Because that'll put you in front of an audience right away. And that was actually a Steal Our Winner strategy from Sean Vossler like a year and a half ago. That was really good. Any thoughts on becoming a thought leader in the space and monetizing your articles, blogs through Substack? I'm a fan of Substack personally. I read a bunch of people on Substack. I haven't really been thinking about it for us just because really, if you guys think this is an excuse, by all means, you can let me have it. But our hands are so full with what we're trying to achieve with Steal Our Winners that me trying some new pursuit right now, probably not wise whatsoever. I need to be focused on Steal Our Winners, the new platform, the AI, all that stuff. Can you recommend someone to take advantage of organizing and promoting to my email contacts? Yeah. I would say that there's a couple of people out there that will manage your list. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for like list management. And Troy Erickson is one of them. If your list is a certain size, you can have someone manage it for you. And if you're in e-commerce, there's Dave Mizrahi. He's done a Steal Our Winners as well. There are people that will manage your list. And if you're not mailing daily, they will generally make a lot more from the list than you would. And then your piece will be a lot more with doing nothing than if you were doing everything and not doing it. How can I find all your work in one place to learn? It's all over the place, but I've written 7 free reports. They're out there. That's the Internet Business Manifesto, the Missing Chapter, the Final Chapter, Attention Age Doctrine 1, 2, Maven Manifesto, Entrepreneurial Emergency. And that's some of the stuff I'm most proud of. So those are my free marketing reports and they're out there. Definitely being a member of Steal Our Winners, you get access to a lot of our stuff. Being a member of our Facebook group, which is free, you get a lot of stuff. I have a ton of live streams that I've done over the last 2 years. You could definitely check that stuff out. They say that 50% of CEOs are narcissists. So I think it's a good idea to know as much about the disorder if you want to do business and remain meditative. There's a big difference between narcissistic personality disorder and narcissism. And I would say that most CEOs, most gurus have some streak of narcissism in them, myself included. That's not the same as narcissistic personality disorder. That's a totally other thing. I'm familiar with that because I know people. If you think about someone who's a guru, they say something is true because they believe it. They have less care what society says versus like, this has been my experience. This is what I believe. And so I believe what I believe is true. I mean, what I was sharing with you earlier is that line of thinking. When I was sharing that, like, my experience in my own body trumps anything that anyone else is going to say to me. That is a narcissistic way of looking at things. Now, that serves me. So I'm not looking to get rid of that. There's a big difference between narcissistic or narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. Big difference between that. I'm looking at using Caleb O'Dowd's mini group for an extensive consulting high ticket. Have you used this method? What do you think of it? I like it. I've seen it work well. We have not used it, but I would like to use it. It's just, there's only so much time in the day. I love your background. What's the 411 on that? My background is pretty boring, to be honest with you. So there's a couple cool things in here. The things I'm probably most proud of are the picture there. Whoops. That picture, which you can't really make out, but that's Frank Sinatra. You wouldn't be able to really see that it's Frank Sinatra even if you were here, but that's Frank Sinatra waving goodbye to a crowd in Monte Carlo in the 1940s. I bought this photo. There's a whole backstory to that, but it's in books and it's worth more than I paid for it. So I'm excited about that. Above that is Conor McGregor's glove that Agora bought for me. It's a signed glove for me. And that is what my background is. Now, I bought these cheap lights on Amazon because Mike Filsaine told me to, and because I liked his lighting. But if I get rid of this lighting, you're going to see how it changes the looks. All right. Leave this dark background since it's unusual. And we're in after hours at this point. How do you get the captions on your live stream? This is using StreamYard. You sound like Einstein, who respected his teachers but thought for himself he was still willing to change if proven wrong. I'm wrong about a lot of things, guys, and I've made my mistakes, and I try to learn as much as I can. How would you structure the buyout for your clients? Well, it depends, right? It could be like 2 times the last year's worth of payments or something like that, paid out over time. Or you just got to be creative, but it should be more than what they owe you next month or what they'd have to pay you for the next year, but not so much more that it becomes like you're still pushing them to screw you. Like at the end of the day, you have to make it so that it's a little painful to buy you out, but not so painful that like, well, screw it. I might as well just screw this person. right? So there's somewhere in between. What Gary Bencivenga once said is he can write faster than anyone who's better and better than anyone who's faster. And there's a lot of truth to that. So if you want to be a world-class copywriter, it just requires a lot of time, patience, a lot of study, a lot of writing, a lot of breaking down the architecture of successful sales letters in the niches that you want to be in, understanding why they resonated, what made them work. It's about developing expertise, and that just requires time, practice, and effort, and reflection on what's worked. The more you practice, the more you do, the better you get at anything. Rich, when you deal with a client, 25% of the sales that you make for them, how do you know if they're actually giving you 25% of what's generated and not less? Do you see their P&L accounts? Generally, I do. But my philosophy, and I'm not suggesting that this is the way everyone should be, but I don't do business with people I don't trust. And I would never rely on a contract. I wouldn't do business with someone I don't trust, and then just because I have a contract, feel like now I've got it handled. Like, the purpose of a contract for me is that both sides agree on what we're agreeing to. I am very anti-litigation and would prefer that I never sue anyone or be sued ever again. And so I'm never going to fall back to a contract except on an understanding part. And so if I don't trust you, I don't want to do business with you, period. If I do trust you, I still might have a contract so that we both agree on what we're agreeing on. And that's not to say that I wouldn't enforce a contract if I have it. It's just not my preference. I would never get into a deal where I'm relying on the contract to keep everyone honest, because if I do, then most likely you're going to be disappointed. Looking to drive traffic to a funnel for our debt relief services, AdWord costs between a low of 25 and a high of 65, cost prohibitive for me. Any thoughts as to where to spend my ad dollars? Lane, if you're a Steal Our Winners member, you definitely want to watch Walter Birch's info on YouTube advertising. He's in the lead generation business for debt relief services. And so his observations come from that market specifically, and he has some very specific advice. If you're not, you'll have to try and track down one of the webinars that I've done out there where I go over Walter Birch's strategy. How to persuade and sell a super skeptical marketplace. The first thing, probably the most important thing, especially if it's a skeptical marketplace, is for them to feel understood. Like, one of the biggest reasons why my reports work so well, I think, is that a lot of people told me when they were reading them that it felt like I was looking over their shoulder. And I've had that experience myself. Like, when I read the first ADD book and I was like, oh my God, they're describing me. The easiest way to overcome skepticism and doubt is to make the person feel understood. We walk around most of the time feeling misunderstood. We feel that most people don't understand us truly. And so when we come across something that we feel does articulate our situation, it's like a life preserver. So I would say that's where empathy comes in. That's where really understanding what are the emotions, what are the frustrations, what are the thoughts that go on in someone's head. That's where earlier on I was recommending this one book, The Perfection of Marketing. And I was saying that if you're a coach, that is a awesome book, because people open up to their coach. So they will tell you what was the defining moment that got people to buy, right? Understanding people is, the deeper you understand their predicament, the better you'll be able to convince them. I have a blog which has been dormant. It's hard for me to access. So do I revive that one or migrate everything somewhere else? Is there a better platform than Blogger? Yeah, Substack. Substack would be the place, but whether you're going to get a following there or not is, you're going to have to stand out in some way. There's going to have to be something that you do to capture attention. Who do you like on Substack? I like a bunch of people. I like Alex Berenson. I like Glenn Greenwald. I think you can get a sense of my politics the more I share. So Matt Taibbi. Which app of software do you use to manage your Q&A for multiple platforms? That's StreamYard. So StreamYard is pulling in from Facebook and YouTube and everything else. My method to organize Evernote is Build a Second Brain by Tiago Fort. And he's got plenty of great resources online for free. Tiago Fort is the guy that you should follow. Thanks, Mark. What is the name of the author of Reimagining Change? I don't know. It's such an old book. You're going to have to do some thinking in order to apply it to marketing. I'm just letting you know that up front. Doyle Canning is one of the authors. There's 3 authors, but it's imagining, one word, change, how to use story-based strategy to win campaigns, build movements, and change the world. I've worked for political campaigns in the past, just so you know. So a lot of these are things that I studied in the past because I've had to do these things in the past. I haven't worked in a political campaign in a while, though. Every time I watch your live streams, which is every time I find them, I'm humbled by your openness and readiness to help. Inspiring. Well, thank you for saying that, Tom. Easy CRM, iTunes. Oh, okay. There you go. Check that out. I noticed that if I type any word or subject in my email, YouTube and Google recommend video or products on that subject at once. I don't think there's any privacy in the matrix. The question is how best to utilize it to our, there is no privacy. I was involved in this other stuff, this AI stuff a couple of years ago. Anytime you land for programmatic advertising to work, right, which is any retargeting or anything like that, what has to happen is you land on a web page, there is a bid system that goes out. We have this user on this page. What's your bid to advertise, and what's the advertisement that you want to put in front of this person? Once that call out exists, that we have this person on this page, there's no privacy. Understand that every time that you land on a page where the ads are not already predefined, that they're defining it based on who you are, there's no privacy. So there's zero privacy online. There's no way around that. And anyone who thinks that there is more likely to just be disappointed. I give credit to Mike Filsain too, because he's the reason why I found out about Steal Our Winners. I got the dial trial and knew I wanted the lifetime option right away. Very cool. Well, thank you, Mike Filsain. Well, Pink Elephant, that's Lakoff is another person to read. Also liberal, but Lakoff has a lot to do with framing and stuff like that. I saw that Dr. Alan Bernard, have you looked into TFC? I taught a course on theory of constraints. Yeah. So I taught a course on theory of constraints back in 2008. I promoted it with a free report called The Entrepreneurial Emergency, The Uncertainty Syndrome. I sold, I think it was like $4 or $5 million worth of a theory of constraints course. I then met Eli Goldratt and Alan at that time in 2008. Eli was completely blown away that someone could learn theory of constraints and make a couple $1 million like within the same year from it. And yeah, so I was able to market theory of constraints in a way that made it much more accessible. And if you want to understand how I was able to do that, then you should get your hands on that free report, The Entrepreneurial Emergency or The Uncertainty Syndrome, because that's how I made the case. And I'm very proud of how I made the case for theory of constraints. Glad you agree. Let's focus on what makes businesses work. Exactly. There's enough places where we can focus on politics that I don't need to do that. But I do think that what's happened to small business is insane. And as someone who spent their life before I moved down here, I moved down to Florida after 9/11. Before that, I lived in Manhattan. And then I lived in Manhattan for 3 years because my girlfriend, Kim, lived in New York, and my oldest daughter, Ava, wanted to go to high school in New York. So I moved up to New York for 3 or 4 years with the deal with Kim that we'd move back down here as soon as Ava graduated. It is such a shame to see what's been done to all the small businesses that have gone out of business and that no one cared. Well, in politics, no one cared. And that there was such deference given to big companies. It's completely unfair. And so many people's lives have been ruined. And we're fortunate because we're online. We're online businesses. We didn't have that same impact. But I used to have an offline business. I've had many offline businesses. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like for the last year and a half if I was still in retail and I had $1.5 million sitting in inventory that was becoming worth less and less and less with every passing day that I was not able to open my store and sell it. I just can't even imagine what's been done to the average offline small business. It's mind-boggling. Will SOW continue in its present form or any changes for 2022? I would imagine you guys have seen this already, but maybe you haven't. So let me show you this. So this is the new Steal Our Winners platform. It's Iggy. So this will be the homepage of Steal Our Winners before you even log in. What's great is now it's so much more searchable, right? If you want to see like a specific topic like copywriting, just go over to copywriting, click on it, and now you'll see all these different ones. So you can preview everything. So every Steal Our Winners segment will have its own preview. They're cross-referenced as to what are the upsides. You can add it to your watch list. You can watch a preview of it, continue watching. Currently, we have a couple beta users using this. Iggy is the actual AI system that will help you determine what is the single best next strategy tactic to use in your business. This is what we've been spending a lot of time on. What roles do you fill? What activities do you engage in? Which channels do you use to market and sell? What are the topics you're most interested in? And then once you answer those questions, then this whole platform is dynamic and will now be based on what Iggy thinks that you'll get the most out of, what we recommend, stuff like that. I don't think the market has seen anything like this. And I think the way other people are thinking about it, they're doing a more direct response kind of thing. I want to build an algorithm that has your best interest in mind, that at the end of the day, nothing is more important to the algorithm to figuring out what is the perfect strategy for you to use right now based on everything it knows about you and everyone that's similar to you and what they've gotten success with and what they haven't. But that's what's coming for Steal Our Winners in 2022. Everything is going to be different. So that is, Charlotte, how Steal Our Winners is going to change. So for the Kindle book ads, which would I do with the, what should I do with the excess inventory keywords that you suggested? Well, there's no one bidding on those keywords. And if you do your books like Kindle Unlimited, which you're not going to make the most money on, but it could be a good way of acquiring customers, and the title is very big on the book, then you're bidding on these products that random people buy that no one's bidding on, and it's going to recommend your product underneath, but it's a book and it has a big title on it. If that is nonfiction, people are going to be very clear on what that book is about before they ever click on it. It's much less of an impulse purchase, even though it's being shown as an impulse purchase. And if it's Kindle Unlimited, then there's no reason not to buy it. That's what I'm talking about, Peter. So that would be what you should try. All right, guys, I have gone an hour over. I hope that over the last year, if you've been on some of these live streams, that at the very least I've entertained you, even though I don't try to be that entertaining. Hopefully I've done more than that. Hopefully I've helped in some way, shape, or form, help you make more progress online in your business and your growth, etc. I really am super grateful to this market, to each and every one of you. So to Higher Profits Beyond, Rich Sheffrin, over and out.